New Zealand couldn't break that jinx. Australia make it happen again. The T20 champions, World Cup champions of 2022. Thank you, Mikhail.
Thank you.
That's all we can take on the show today. Plus Sports and Plus TV Africa. Join us same time tomorrow, same station. My name is Wale Scott. Like I always advise you at the end of every show, if not for anything, at least for your heart, do some sports.
As Nigeria's public debt surpasses 35 trillion naira. This is Plus Politics. I am Mary Anna Cole. For quite some time now, several stakeholders have advocated for a cut in the cost of governance. However, it seems the Nigerian government is only interested in amassing more debt, as this has been on the increase in recent times. For instance, in 2022, the president's office will spend 1.6 billion naira on new vehicles, the fourth largest of any government in office. Now, that comes just a year after the office spent nearly $500 million on the same item. Also, personal cost has continued to rise yearly, despite the government not conducting a major recruitment. In 2022, there are hopes that the government will spend 350 billion more on personal costs and 167 billion more than it did in 2021. Well, joining us to discuss this is Ladikwa Johnson. He is a legal practitioner. Kofi Battels is a broadcast journalist. And Richard F. Inoyo is a financial analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
Great. I'm going to start with you, Richard, because we're talking about lots of money here. And, it's very interesting because there seems to be a case of inflation that has not been explained so far to us as Nigerians. But then we see the government spending billions on vehicles, and this is barely a year after they had done so. Now, we're a cash-strapped government. We all know that the government in the country is facing money problems. We've been borrowing. And we know that the government is trying everything in its power to, make sure that they meet all of their budgets, except for the fact that they're most interested in buying cars. And I'm wondering, if we're borrowing monies to, fund our budgets, why spend that same money that we're looking for on expensive vehicles?
Well, let me start by saying I don't even think the issue is the cars they are budgeting for, basically. Because over the last, 5 years plus, we've spent about 5 billion on cars. That's not where my concern is. The major concern I have right now is not about the cars. The major concern I have is in the area of software, for instance. We're spending close to about 19 billion naira on software. That simply means we're spending close to about 10 times even what we're spending on cars. And that should call for concern. Okay, so the car, I think it's just something that leaders tends to do because they won't want to use any car that is older than either 6 months or 9 months or a year. But when you look into the fact that as a country where we're calling for so much as in cuts in administrative costs, we're seeing a president telling us that they're going to spend 19 billion naira on software. The question would have been, what kind of software do we need, okay, that we have to spend 19 billion naira for? These are things I believe that Nigerians are supposed to focus on, not necessarily on the car. For me, 1.6 billion for cars, though start, but I know for sure that there's no way any president, especially the one we have in Nigeria, would want to drive one particular car home, few set of cars the next.
As much as you're playing down on it, it's 1 point something billion naira that could have been put in healthcare. It's 1 point something billion naira that could have been put in education, and you're playing down on it. So I'm wondering, how important is that cat to the president as opposed to the health of people in areas where there are waterborne diseases, or for example, health posts that are no longer working? Which one should be prioritized over which?
Well, I agree with you. We're not running from the fact that the policy in itself angers Nigerians. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying that even though the entire country is focused on cars for 1.6 billion naira, I'm thinking that as a country, we're supposed to also shift our searchlight to software that costs the country 19 billion naira. That is huge for me. I don't care what the president wants to tell Nigerians. When it gets to the point where we have to spend up to 19 billion for software, it's raised concern. So the truth here is that what we've seen over the years is the lack of sincerity, the lack of focus, the lack of priority on the part of this government. So this government seems not to care about the feelings, seems not to care about its sensitivity that Nigerians bring to the fore when it comes to the issue of budgeting. And let me put it to you clearly. Even this 1.6 billion is an indication that what we have in Nigeria is not evidence-based budgeting. Rather, what we have is just few set of persons allocating national reserve to themselves in the name of budgeting. And that, for me, is something that we all need to look into. Why we are also calling for, as in the president, as a show restraint on what the president spend on food and other expenses. I still think Nigerians need to start raising issues and raising questions around software that would cost this country 19 billion naira.
All right. Very important point that you picked out, Richard. I'm going to come back to you for more analysis. But I'm coming to you, Kofi, because you are a journalist, and one of the responsibilities of journalists is to, pick these holes or find out these important parts of our budget and bring it to light. For example, Richard is saying that the 1.6 billion is not as important as the 19 billion under the subhead of, software. And these are areas that we should be questioning. But again, how many people are really interested or even have the knowledge about what's happening within the budget? We hear about the budget hearings, the presentations that are being made, but the average Nigerian is worried about the price of food in the markets, the price of gas that might be 10,000 naira next year, and all the other simple things. So which Nigerian, other than you and I and a couple of us who are interested in what's happening within the budget, would be questioning all of these things under these ambiguous subheads?
The middle class that has continued to keep quiet in the face of several injustices in Nigeria are the ones who are aware. I mean, though some would argue there's an absence of a real middle class in the sense of the word in Nigeria, but you know what I mean. These are people who have a university degree. These are people who drive a car to work and have an office job or have a business they own. These are people who pay for their monthly subscriptions and different things like data. These people know what this means. And these are the people like you and I who should be speaking up about things like this. I mean, for a country that has consistently run a budget deficit since 2016, or 2015, Marianne, they say you should not spend what you don't have, live within your means. Nigeria right now is like a man who is borrowing to fund a lavish lifestyle. It's a man who is saying, give me money, I need to pay for my children's school fees. Please give me money, I need to buy some food for the house and all that. Then goes to a pub or a nightclub and spends it on Dorime. That's what Nigeria is in right now. So we need to speak up. I mean, 16.4 trillion naira budget for 2022, and you have a shuffle of more than 6 trillion naira, a recurrent expenditure of more than 4 trillion naira, meaning that for every 160 naira the government spends, 60 naira will be borrowed and 40 naira will go to financing government operations. For every 160 naira the government spends, 60 naira will be borrowed, and out of that 60 naira, 40 naira will go to finance government operations. I mean, that's more than 50% of what they're borrowing. So in other words, You're borrowing, and the majority of what they're using, which is out of 16 naira, 14 naira, is going to just fund the lifestyle of government. So whether it's software or whether it's vehicles, the fact is that this government came into power in 2015, telling Nigerians this is what we need to do. We need to cut down on government spending. I remember there's a time they were saying they were not going to even print stationery or government souvenirs and all that to try and cut down on. But here we are. It's spending with reckless abandon. Nigeria is digging itself into a hole that will spell doom if care is not taken for the future generations. And the Nigerians who know what this means need to speak up.
Mr. Johnson, this is a president who promised that he was going to cut the cost of governance. For a president who preaches prudence, a president who in his first tenure, the very first few months, he and his VP halved their salaries, and we're asking other government officials to do the same. And we're in 2021 talking about lavish cars and ambiguous subheads in our budgets for a government that promised to fight corruption. What does this say about that government, and where does this leave us as a country? There are people who make a case that there's nothing wrong with borrowing. Yes, there isn't anything wrong with borrowing, but how do we spend that money, and what does the future hold for the results of how we spend that money?
Yes, it's an unfortunate situation, and but as Kofi Bartel said, the problem here is with the middle class. We have fallen asleep. We're still asleep. There's no electricity, you decide to run your generator. There's insecurity, you decide to buy guard dogs. There's no water, you dig your own borehole, and you think you're all right. It's going to implode one of these days. It cannot continue this way. This government has failed to cut any costs, not just the executive. Look at the legislature. I'm a member of the legal profession, and you see how the judiciary spending money at the moment as well, going for conferences overseas. It's as if the Naira hasn't fallen. It's as if it isn't more expensive to do these things. And they keep going on and on. The three arms of government. Of course, the two guilty arms are the legislature and the executive. But the bottom line is that they will not stop. This government, the executive, has shown that it lacks the willpower to bring about the positive change it preached to the people. I should say we preached to the people. I was part of them at that time. But there's been no positive change. There's been change quite all right, but everything's going southwards. It's going down. So look at the budget over the years. Just look at the presidential villa and look at the budget head on cutlery, for instance, and see what you've seen year in, year out. Then you know that it's just a joke. So unless, and we've reached the stage where you're borrowing to pay your recurrent expenditure, pay for recurrent expenditure, and about 70% or what have you, God knows what we're spending on servicing our debts.
Mr. Johnson, are you still there? I think that we lost Mr. Johnson briefly there, but let me come back to you, Richard, quickly. Now, there's an analysis from the tabloid Premium Times. I'd like to just quote them directly. They're saying that the revenues that we're getting as a country are simply inadequate to fund fundamental expenditure. Therefore, every available fund should be spent with the greatest value for money. It has to be tied to high-level national policy framework and aimed at improving livelihoods. It's also saying that it has to be something that would grow the economy, reduce poverty and inequality. This is something that we don't see happening. So if the monies are not being targeted in those areas, what do we do? Because again, you're talking about the second-class citizens, even though we may not necessarily know the difference between that class and, you know, the people who are in the third class or people who are poor. But then, how do we get those people in that cadre to be able to speak up? Because yes, they might be able to get by, but for how long? Again, it's dawning on all of us that things are getting worse. So what do we do as a financial person, as someone who's analyzing, you know, the budgets year in, year out, someone who's looking at how the inflation is rising and falling every single day? How do we get people to jump on this conversation? Because it seems not even to be happening. We just grumble on our coffee tables or on our breakfast tables or in beer parlors, and that's it.
Well, let me start by saying, as a country, we don't have ideology. Okay, that's where it starts from. We don't have ideology. So what we just have political parties where people choose to join those political parties for specific interests they have. So it's not necessarily because they have an ideology. So as long as people don't have ideology, you'll find it difficult for them to even join the conversation or to lead specific conversations. So that is where we are right now. So how do you get people to basically start speaking up? You have to create centers for ideological development. You have to create centers for ethical consciousness. You have to create a network of centers where people would be enlightened. That way they come to realize why they need to speak up. That's one. Two, you need to also understand that we are currently in a police state. This is a state where people are being killed, people are being arrested just because they choose to speak up, or because they choose to protest against the government, where they feel the government policies is not aligned with building the right future for Nigerians. So the issue here is, how do you guarantee safety of people speaking up? That is another thing. So there are several institutional issues that we must first of all address for you to get people to speak up. It's not as if people don't want to speak up, but once you're done speaking up, what happens next? This is a country where we've seen military leaders being murdered. So all of these issues are there, okay? So if you're going to get people to speak up, first you have to create a network of centers with different mandates and responsibility to enlighten and to build consciousness in the lives of Nigerians. That's one. Two, you also need to look for a way to ensure security to get their voice heard.
I appreciate how you rolled this out, Richard. I appreciate how you rolled all of this out. You tried to talk about the problems and the solutions, but then when you say we, who's we? Because the power, unfortunately, lies at the center. And just as you said, people have been killed because they spoke up. So all of these beautiful ideas that you're rolling out, who's the we that's going to implement it? Because I cannot ensure security. I can only ensure security for myself. And that's limited to where I go, what I say, and what I do. So when you say we, are we taking the responsibilities of government and security agencies on ourselves, or what exactly do you mean?
The truth here, if you listen to the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, he spoke recently and he said that citizens in Ethiopia need to pick up arms to protect themselves because they are being faced, okay, by the existential threat of rebel coming into their country. So I don't know if that is true or false in respect to those who are coming into the country. But the primary thing here is that man basically made it clear that citizens should protect themselves when their life is threatened.
But it's not the job of the citizens but it's not the job of the citizens to protect themselves. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took an oath of office promising, which is his number one responsibility, to protect the lives of his citizens. Now, there's a war in Tigray, for those who do not know. What is happening in Tigray is obviously what's spilling over and the TPLF is trying to spread its tentacles. But that's a man-made problem, not necessarily something that the people of Ethiopia should be taking arms to protect themselves. It's a political issue that needs a political solution.
I agree with you. I'm coming to a particular side of the conversation, and that is the side of self-defense. Basically, we're in a country right now where people are being murdered. In cross of the states, we've had several kidnappings. So the issue here is that even while we're hoping that government will live up to one of its responsibility of ensuring security, it still boils down to how do you defend yourself when you face, with threat of life. So I believe that the citizen, Nigerians as a whole, must recognize three things. One, they must recognize that the citizens, it is in their interest to produce governments. And that is one of the responsibility of citizens. Unfortunately, in this country, people are not so much interested in how we produce our leaders. If you look at the statistics out there, in respect to those who come out to votes, you discover that the turnover is always low. That's one. Two, it is also very important to realize that when government fails to live up to certain responsibility, and when you know that your life might be threatened in the process, it calls upon your own human instincts to find a way to protect yourself. So Nigerians must learn, to figure out ways to ensure their security while they are calling on government to do the right thing. Because unfortunately, we're still dealing with what I call, go ahead.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to land because I mean this is a conversation that we have to have on another day. But I want to quickly go to the other guests so that we can wrap this up. But thank you, Richard. Kofi, I'm coming back to you, but just taking up from where Richard stopped. We have somewhat become a government for ourselves. We grade our own roads and sometimes tar them. And just like Mr. Johnson said, you dig your own borehole, you provide your own lights. We've even gone beyond buying generators now to getting inverters because we need light and we need to be able to sustain our businesses where governments and thugs also come to harass you. So we've become a government to ourselves somewhat, but have we gotten to a point of fatigue? Have we resigned to fate? Could that also be responsible for the reason why we're not necessarily screaming at the top of our voices anymore? We just keep managing. If we're pushed to the wall, we just create some more space within the wall and stay there. So is that where we are? Because there's some lethargic reaction to government issues these days.
Yes, indeed. When you keep complaining about the same thing over and over and over again, you keep shouting about the same thing over and over again. At some point, you get tired. At some point, you just get exhausted, and at some point, you would give up. I mean, Nigerians have been shouting about several things for some years now, and those things have not changed. And some sort of fatigue has set in, some sort of tiredness has set in. It's normal as far as human beings are concerned. Typical thing for, someone on the street to say would be, or in a beer parlor somewhere, or on a radio station, so not them, not their way, not so them be, not so politicians be, leave them, make them do their thing. The president is traveled to at least 7 major cities in 6 countries in the last 8 weeks. And this is meant to be a country where you have a budget deficit since 2015. And by the way, one of your guests was asking, what is the debt service, figure and all that. Well, in 2021, the amount of money Nigeria made from crude oil sales, or was projected to make from crude oil sales, is this exact same amount of money, or just about the same amount of money Nigeria was meant to use to service its debt. So it basically means that the nation is making nothing from crude oil sales, which is basically zero. So I think fatigue is set in, but that is where we need to have voices to stand up and galvanize Nigerians. People just need someone. Just need one person, 2 people, 3 people. Look at the NSAS protests. People were at home until they saw certain persons on the streets, and then they came out too. All right, they came out too. So we need to have voices. Unfortunately, the leading opposition party in Nigeria, being the PDP, is really not, any different from what we're seeing. We need a voice. We need some person, some intellectuals or intelligentsia, people who know what to do. Like the great philosophers of old said, to stand up and speak. People have the interests of the country at heart. And when these people stand up and speak and rally...
This or that, even down to the political parties asking that they make their finances open. But most of these cases and these suits, just pile up and nothing really comes of it. So the question again is, where does the judiciary, come in all of this? Because, when I was on the radio, you'd hear a lot of people say, oh, that's the last hope of the common man. But is that really still a hope for the common person?
Well, it is. And we pray that it continues to be. Because the moment the common man has no hope, then the common man takes to the streets. And the first people who will suffer and dealt with the ShopRite and everything in the area. So the middle classes have to realize that it behoves on us to make sure, to make certain that we do not get tired, that we're not fatigued, that we continue to talk, we continue to speak. And as Kofi said, it takes a few good men and women. You don't need the whole country or whole community. No. It takes a few people to bring about a change. And we just have to begin to work towards that, begin to organize. It's all about organizing. You have to get people going, talking to them, bring people with different interests together, and let them realize that cutting corners might be good for you as an individual, but overall, it brings down the country. If you cannot do the small or little things the right way, the big things will not fall into place. It's not magic.
And finally,
I always call Nigeria organized chaos. Sorry.
Yeah. Before the network disconnected, I was going to add something quickly. We have also seen the disobedience of court orders, over and over again. And the biggest story in the news is the attack on the justice number 3, in the country. Again, it takes me back to the question I asked earlier on. How empowered, how independent, how strong is the Nigerian judiciary as we speak in today's Nigeria under the Buhari administration? Can we really be sure that if we decide today to say we as a people are challenging this government to court on this and that those cases will see the light of day?
Just quickly commenting. I think the only thing we have that's the only thing we have. We have to keep hope alive, but I believe that our judiciary, the way it's constituted, is open to all kinds of control from the executive. Maybe we have to actually reinvent our judiciary in such a way that how we end up having judges in our courts and how we end up having the Supreme Court justice, maybe as one. But most importantly, Nigerians must continuously ask for stronger institutions by putting government under pressure to ensure that our institutions work better and efficiently to deliver the justice we need as citizens.
All right, quickly, Kofi, as we wrap up. A Vanguard newspaper journalist got missing. It took a whole row for even the National Assembly to speak of it. And they were still, I remember watching the last time I saw anything from the National Assembly, the speaker was saying, well, we're still investigating, we'll see what we can do. There was nothing really serious being done. And then all of a sudden, his body was found dead, obviously. And we've also seen all kinds of, darts thrown in the direction of the media, knowing they also joined the second class.
Well, I mean, the media is part of Nigeria. The media is a sector in the country. And so whatever affects Nigeria or Nigerians affects the media. But I wouldn't say that the media dropped the ball or has fatigue over this issue because, I mean, whenever a journalist is affected by a negative situation, we see that other media houses, other people in the journalism profession are able to rally together to demand for action. We've seen the Nigerian Union of Journalists in particular taking the lead as well as other journalism, associations, for instance, those from the Middle Belt and Benue State and all that, coming together to speak about this. This story has had coverage in the media. So I don't think we have, as a collective section of the Nigerian, nation, any apathy or any fatigue. No. We've been talking about this. But of course, as human beings, you will get tired, you'll get worn out. But we've been talking about this. Every now and then when something happens to a member of the media fraternity, we wake up. I mean, in my case, when I was brutalized by officers of the Nigerian police who were working for the SWAL SARS, media organizations around the country stood up. In the case of the PlusTvAfrica presenter who was kidnapped in Port Harcourt, it was all over the place. So at least these ones wake us up, if at all we go to sleep. And I think that the coverage hasn't been that bad. But, well, time will tell whether the story you're being told is believable or not. We're watching and we're speaking.
Well, I want to say thank you. Ladipo Johnson is a legal practitioner. Unfortunately, his connection went off. Kofi Battels is a broadcast journalist, and Richard Inoyo is a financial analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Good night. Thank you.
We'll take a quick break. When we return, the PDP believes the APC has a hand in the attack of Justice Mary Odili's residence. We'll talk about it shortly. Stay with us.
This Medan has been directed to empower 1,000 persons with disabilities in each state in the next 12 months.
When I start hearing the shoot of gun.
Whatever I have done.
Every public policy has winners and losers, and some will not be very happy with you, while others, usually the silent majority, will be quite happy.
Nigeria's Niger Delta region, from where the black gold fuels Africa's largest economy, where the lines between wealth and poverty has never been thinner. Conflicts, poverty, insecurity, and environmental challenges daily confront the region. How can the Niger Delta story be changed for the better?
Join Mamude Akuga at 9 p.m. every Friday evening on PlusTvAfrica as he probes deep in search of solutions.
Inside the Niger Delta with Mamude Akuga, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region.
Hello and welcome. It's Nimasa This Week, the voice of maritime. Nimasa This Week is brought to you by the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. Statutorily mandated to ensure that there's regulation and promotion of matters affecting our waters. NIMASA bears responsibility for search and rescue, shipping development, and ship registration.
NIMASA This Week, the voice of maritime, showing on this channel.
Welcome. It's still Plus Politics. Now, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has said the recent onslaught on the residence of the Supreme Court Judge Justice Mary Odili is part of a grand design by the ruling APC, which is the All Progressives Congress, to hijack the 2023 elections. This is even as the party described the attack on Justice Odili's residence as horrendous, rascally, irresponsible, completely unjustified, and should not be swept under the carpet on the guise of misleading whistleblower operation. Now, to discuss this with us is, of course, legal practitioner Ladipo Johnson. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, for staying with us. Mr. Johnson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. So we've been following this story. It's a developing story as we see. Some people were caught, paraded by security agents. One person seems to be singing like a canary, and he did make allegations against the Attorney General of the Federation, saying that this was, that they had a conversation that led to, the raid. Now, the AGF has said that he does not know this person. He has never seen him. He has never had a conversation with him. So I'm going to ask this question because you are a lawyer. Should this be a case that is being investigated? Of course, yes. He's the Attorney General of the Federation. Should it be investigated? The PDP is saying that this might be swept under the carpet and under the guise of a whistleblower, and they're saying that because it's not true. But is it not investigatable? Mr. Johnson, can you hear me? I think we're having a connection issue there. But can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'll try again. Mr. Johnson, can you hear me? Unfortunately, we cannot hear him. Let's see if we can take a quick break and then get him back. All right, Mr. Johnson, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, the network is not too stable.
It's okay.
I assume you're talking about...
Yes, investigating the claims by one of those who were arrested by security agents. We'll take that quick break.
I heard about the yes. Sorry, I didn't get the whole question. But basically, if none of the agencies of government can say...
I'm sorry, we have to really take that break. We will be back.
It is engagement we need to have.
Those who suffer miscarriages are never taken into account.
Members of the National Assembly are also influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the Babin, I pay my rent. From the Babin, I send my children to school.
A consultative engagement.
No any tangible notification before they ban us.
It's one thing for people to be at your back and the heat of the moment, and another thing for them to still be with you when push comes to shove.
I will do everything to take Lagos out of the national grid.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize.
What you can see is the remaining of the tanker
that exploded.
The suspect equally confessed.
A 500 naira they collect them. If you no talk, they go beat you. Now 2,500 they pay.
Is it for upcoming artists to blow in Nigeria?
Welcome to Plus Trending. I am Bookie November, your host, saying thank you for joining us on today's episode.
Welcome back. It's tea time on Plus TV Africa.
Practice makes perfect. I'm not perfect yet, but I'm a lot better than I used to be.
He's a king. He's entitled to marry 100 if he wants to.
Welcome, it's still Plus Politics. Apologies for the connection issues. We still have joining us, Ladikpat Johnson. Now, Mr. Johnson, I was asking a quick question before we had the disconnection. So there have been allegations leveled against the Attorney General of the Federation, even though he has denied those claims. But does the claim or the denial stop an investigation, which might also include the Attorney General?
Yes, it's such a sad situation that the Attorney General of the Federation would be totally unaware of what happened. Surely he could liaise with the Inspector General, the DSS, and all of the agencies.
But then the PDP is saying that the PDP is sounding almost certain. I know you're not speaking for the PDP or for the government of the day. The PDP is almost certain that because the Attorney General of the Federation has been fingered in this issue, it might be swept under the carpet, and this might be the last that we hear of it, except that people keep pushing for an investigation, a thorough investigation to be done. But my major question is, can the Attorney General not be investigated as a suspect in this issue because somebody has fingered him?
Yes, Marianne, the Attorney General can be investigated. He's not above the law. But do you have a precedent that can say, Attorney General, step aside for a few months? That why the PDP is correct to say that it's probably the last we'll hear about it, or it will be swept under the carpet. As I said, it's such a shame, and it's not the first one. Look at the Abakari, the policeman issue.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. So we know how history of this in Nigeria, it's unfortunate. What would happen in a
we're having really serious connection issues with you, Mr. Johnson. Unfortunately, it's not letting us hear you. So I'm gonna unfortunately let you go. It's not your fault, but we cannot hear you. The connection is really bad today. But thank you very much for speaking with us. All right. Well, on that note, we'll take a quick break, bring you the reactions of Nigerians to the attack of the Justice Odili's residence. And when I return, I'll give you my take.
all know that everybody has condemned it, and I share the same view, because those who went there seem not to have gone there for any meaningful purpose. That is why all of them are denying and backing out. So I feel if a Supreme Court justice could be so invaded, that means every other ordinary citizen of this country is not safe.
The invasion is totally an aberration from the rules of law, and I actually condemn it from my innermost emotion. I feel so bad about it, and I'm not happy. That's just it.
There need to be some major improvement on that. Because I discovered that over time, the wheel of justice in this country grinds too slow. And that have been denying litigants, particularly innocent litigants, and litigants who ordinarily will have, possibly their damages, or maybe whatever wrong they have had will have been, either ameliorated or will have been totally compensated.
Anything can happen in our country, There is no fire without smoke. I think reading that it has a reason, even if at the end of the day it was denied that nothing happened. Well, I don't see anything much to read. What she need to do is definitely she would know the person that raided the house, the people that planned that, the people that planned the scene. So it's nothing. Whatever the public is reacting to is of no use to us, because it's just like where a politician fighting each other. You'll be thinking that they are fighting for our sake, whereas they are fighting for themselves.
It's time for my take. Now, every day we have conversations around what government should do, what government is not doing, what we expect of government, and what we should do to get government to meet our demands or deliver the dividends of democracy. It's all just talk. Now, until we move from just having those conversations to making sure that we push those demands to our government, hold them responsible, make sure that they give us the dividends that they promised us. Election season is around the corner. 2022, they will come for your votes. They will start. I saw something on social media talking about, it's election season. They will start, selling corn. Some of them will start helping to plait hair. They will start acting like they can eat the food that you eat just in the buka because they want your vote. Well, if we're really serious about the type of governance that we want from these leaders, it's time for us to show them that we're done with these tricks. We're done with the games. It's time for serious business. If you do not have anything to offer us, don't come to us. Don't try to get our votes, because if we give you our votes, then we expect something in return. Not your 500, not your 5,000, not your rice, not your sauce. We want you to do the job. If you cannot do the job, do not come to us. Let's begin to borrow a lift from the Anambra people. They voted for who they wanted. Even when there were inducements, they decided that this was who they wanted. There was no hanky-panky. Even when there was some form of hanky-panky, the people stood there, cast their votes, and made sure that it counted. It's now the job of every single Nigerian to look at the Anambra example. If you want a change in your country, well, you got to be ready. Get your card. I asked somebody yesterday, do you have a voter's card? No. How do you want to change Nigeria? Get your voter's card. Join a political party. Be part of the decision making, so that when the party throws up a candidate, it would be a candidate that you and I are sure of, that he or she might be able to deliver the dividends of democracy. Until then, keep saying that politics is a dirty game. They will soon rob you the dirt. My name is Mary Anoko. Thank you for watching.
His medal has been directed to empower 1,000 persons with disabilities in each state in the next 12 months.
When I start hearing the shoot of gun,
every public policy has winners and losers, and some will not be very happy with you, while others, usually the silent majority, will be quite happy.
Every single one of us. I do not believe we call this place home. And I say that because where in Nigeria would you say is world standard, despite all the resources? You look at the South with all the oil there, it's like a dump, unfortunately polluted. You look at the North with the massive land up there, what are we producing out of it? You look at the Southwest with the waters, what are we doing with the marine technology? So for me, I always use the we so as not to isolate everybody else. And I strongly believe that the problem with Nigeria is psychological. I think what we just need is a psychological reorientation. We have the ability, we have the knowledge, we have the talent. We're just not being harnessed and directed properly. And the moment they cross these waters, they excel. Both Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, South, everybody in Nigeria. We've been ranked the most successful ethnic group in the United States. Why is it that we excel there, but not at home? It can only lead to the direction.
The scary one is the fourth category. We call them miscellaneous. Why do we say miscellaneous? Because you can't classify them as drugs. Petrol, nail polish remover, gum, a vote stick, something like toilet fumes, pit latrine, or if a non-flowing gutter, the stuff are taken, are built into a mold and put fire to it, and then they inhale it. You see, this is not localized to Nigeria. I saw it in Kenya when I visited Kenya some years ago. Some young, you know when you see people go to dung hill to begin scavenge, you watch some of them. They will sit down, put fire to it, and stand around it. The fumes that come out produce something like methane, which is also something that they inhale. So that is why we should worry, just as you said. If I can't afford cocaine, I will afford something in that category that gives the same effect in lesser category. And then lizard dung. People will gather the white part of the lizard dung, grind it, and then put fire to it or sniff it. Oh no. And also, around Pakistan, Eastern Asia, they use scorpion. They will kill scorpion, dry it, and then use it to see. In Nigeria here, there's something called gegemu. You may not know it. People in the villages know it. There is a natural growing plant